Hello, everyone. We are live on both YouTube and Facebook right now. So wherever you are watching me from, hello, say hi in the comments. If you're watching on replay, say hello as well. This is our monthly live show that I do. I love to do a live show because everything else I do over on YouTube is all recorded and it's all great. But I like to talk about things that are a little bit more topical. What's going on right now? What do small business owners really need to know about today? So because of that, that's why we need to do this live, because this stuff is changing all the time. So this is our February of 2026 live show, wherever you're joining me from. Hello. Say hello in the comments. And I'm excited for you to be here. We have some good stuff to talk about today, and good stuff in terms of just some meaty things that are going on right now that I want people to be aware of that could be impacting your small business. And we try to make this really understandable, bite size, but just to kind of keep you informed and know what's coming on the radar screen. So that's really our intention here today. Okay, so first and foremost, I have to call out a new sponsor. We have a new sponsor alert. Really excited about this, Crew. If y'all have not seen Crew, okay, I need you to go run to jamietrull.com/crew, because this is actually a personal banking. I don't do a ton of, here, I'll show you this. I don't do a ton of partnering with companies that do personal finance, because I'm really more on the business finance side of things. So I have business banking relationships, things like that. But Crew is a personal banking fintech. And Crew, the thing I love about it, I actually met them at a conference not too long ago. And I talked to them for a while, and they have actually developed a banking app that allows you to earn interest on checking, and not like a little bit interest, like high yield checking, which typically is reserved for, high yield savings accounts that are a little bit tougher to, use in your day-to-day, right? But this is a high yield checking account. Okay. So that's what I love about it. Right now, they have a special that they are giving to our audience. So I wanted to let y'all know this. And it's an incredible special. If you sign up for a free, okay, Crew is free, by the way, a free Crew account, then you're going to be able to get an extra 1% APY boost. So an extra, essentially, interest rate boost that on the interest that you earn. The standard rate right now, obviously rates change based on what's going on, but the standard rate is 2.95%, I believe. So with the added APY boost, that's 3.95%. That's roughly 4% interest on a checking account. Y'all, it's unbelievable. Not only that, I could go on for a long time. I switched to Crew last year, and I actually set up, my kids have accounts under Crew. You can do that for free, where they have their own actual account with, an account number, routing number. Y'all know I hire my kids, so I pay them into Crew. Anyway, I adore it. It has the various different reserves, like the things that I love about Relay. I could go on, but I just wanted to let you guys know that there is this special going on. And if you sign up by the end of February, you can get a 1% APY boost for the first 3 months, which is amazing. So definitely check out Crew, jamietrull.com/crew. Okay, now we're going to get into it. Now that we're done with the sponsorship stuff, we're going to get into the meaty stuff. So today I want to talk about a few things. We're going to talk about, mainly because if you caught last month, we talked about the potential looming, partial government shutdown. Well, we are actually, you may not even realize this, but we are in a partial government shutdown, specifically related to the Department of Homeland Security. So we're going to talk about that and how it may or may not affect you and what's going on there. We're also going to talk about the word of the week, right? Which is tariffs. We're going to be talking about tariffs. There were some really important developments that happened. The Supreme Court essentially rejected Trump's ability to put tariffs on using the code that he was using. And so now it's a little chaotic. So we're going to talk about that. How does that affect you? Can you get your money back if you paid tariffs? Let's talk about that. And then we're going to talk a little bit about a chart that I saw that kind of threw me for a loop. And there's been a lot of talk about how high the Dow is, how high the S&P is, but it feels like it doesn't align with what we're feeling economically. And I'm going to show you why, and we're going to talk about it. So those are some interesting topics we're going to be talking about today. Then we're going to get into the to-dos and the queues section. But first, let's jump on into that, our first section. All right, here we are. Like I said, I gave you the teaser of all the things we're talking about today, so stick around. First and foremost, partial shutdown. Department of Homeland Security has a partial shutdown. I like to link just various different articles if you guys want to go check out more about what's happening and read up on it. So this is a CNN article that's talking about it. And ultimately I talked about this last month, where we had to pass a budget and, we were wondering, are they gonna, there was fights over Department of Homeland Security funding, largely around ICE and immigration enforcement, and specifically some of the things that were going on in Minnesota. So, I kind of predicted there's going to be a fight here. I'm curious to see how bad it is. I will say the good thing is they did pass a funding bill for like all the rest of the government. It's just the Department of Homeland Security. So it could have been a situation where they held up everything for this specific piece, which is what happened last year, right? Where everything got held up for one specific kind of disagreement. And the parties tend to use leverage, right? Like they want to have the leverage of these other things that the other party wants. And so they'll hold up everything. And they didn't do that in this situation, which I think is a good way to go about it, where we actually can pass the things that we agree on, and now let's work on the thing that we don't. So the Department of Homeland Security funding is a big issue. Now, I want to say, I think that the fact that it's a partial shutdown, you might think, oh, well, ICE can't operate at the same capacity because isn't the Department of Homeland Security partially shut down? Yes, but they still have plenty of funding. And I showed this chart last time, but I wanted to bring it up really quickly again, just to kind of drive the point home about what funding we're actually talking about. Okay. So this was an NPR article that had come out, but I think it's a really useful chart to look at, because what we're looking at here is the typical budget for ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, every year. And so these are like already the obligated for a specific purpose. And then these are the additional funds. So last year, when the One Big Beautiful Bill Act was passed, they got this $73.8 extra $billion. Now, this is payable over a couple of years, so it's not necessarily all for 2025. It's one thing I don't love about this chart. It makes it look like they're going to spend this all in 2025. They could, but this is over the next couple of years. However, this isn't what they're fighting up. That's already been passed by Congress. ICE already has access to this funding. It's this part they're arguing about, the regular, normal, ongoing budget allocation. That's what is being talked about right now. So even with the Department of Homeland Security partially shut down, just know I don't see this really impacting immigration and customs anytime soon. What it could affect, unfortunately, right, for the rest of us is it could affect things like air travel. And right now, the administration already said a couple of days ago that they were going to be rolling back, and there wasn't going to be TSA pre-check or global entry, that there wasn't enough staff, and to deal with the staffing shortages of this partial shutdown, because TSA is under the Department of Homeland Security, that they were going to be rolling that back. Now, they kind of took part of that back pretty quickly, like same day. They were like, all right, fine. There was a big backlash on this. And so they said, okay, TSA pre-check, is going to stick around, but it might be limited in, various different airports and things like that. But they kind of walked back the fact that they were going to shut down TSA pre-check, which, I'm traveling next month and I'm TSA pre-check. So I would really hope that it's functioning. But they have shut down currently global entry, meaning if you have like that extra global entry that speeds things up at the airport, it is, that is not going to be accessible right now for you. There's a lot of pressure around that. So we'll see what happens. Technically, they won't actually miss a paycheck. I believe they'll get a partial paycheck February 28th. And the first full missed paycheck, if this shutdown continues, will be March 14th. So what tends to happen with these shutdowns is a lot of people, even though most of these people are technically essential workers, right? They need to continue to report to work. Guess what? Your motivation kind of wanes when you're not getting a paycheck. And so you tend to have staffing shortages and things like that in the middle of these. Let's see. I'm just going to come in here. We have a comment. They've taken the value out of our premium earned wages. It's like we are working for nothing. They're out of control spenders with no regard for the value of our earned income. Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I think it's fair to hold the government accountable for where our money goes. And I think that's true. That's true across the board. I mean, that's technically what voting is, right? It's helping you determine, okay, where do I want my money to go? What aligns with my values? But it can be really frustrating. And I'm feeling more than usual a push where, and I say this, and I will quickly say, I do not advise this. As a CPA, I cannot advise this. But I'm seeing a lot of posts about people who are literally marking themselves exempt on their tax returns and saying, you know, I'm a sovereign citizen and therefore I don't need to pay taxes. I don't recommend that. Probably isn't going to end super well. You could get away with it for a while because the IRS is also short-staffed, but unfortunately, for us as normal people, you know, they will come find us. So we have to be a little bit careful there with what we do, but we can vote. That is the one thing that we can do, is vote. And again, like, they reversed this whole TSA pre-check thing. So if we're loud enough and we call our Congress people, right, it can collectively make a difference. I refuse to believe that we just have no power. We have a lot more power than we think in all of these things. So we just need to use our voices to make ourselves known, because this is our money. It's our money that is being utilized by the government. And it's part of, living in this country and having access to all the things that we have access to. But unfortunately, we don't get to vote on every little thing, right? Okay, so that's kind of what's going on with the government shutdown. And I just wanted to give, an update on that because we talked about it last time. However, I think the biggest kind of headline that I really want to talk about today is regarding tariffs. This is a big shift. There has been a lot that has happened in the world of tariffs. I'm going to pull up an article here in just a minute, get rid of all my pop-ups that are coming up. But there was a big Supreme Court ruling that the president was not very happy about. And if you did watch, and here, so you can find the access to the article that I'm about to put up, you can find, here we go. You could see that he was not very happy about this. He talked about this, quite a bit in his State of the Union. So last night, he clearly is unhappy with what the Supreme Court decided in a 5-3 decision. But ultimately, the code that Trump was using to establish these tariffs, we talked a ton about tariffs last year on Power Numbers. Like, this was like the on again, off again tariff insanity, right? What do we do? What should, how do we handle this? And so what ended up happening is kind of what I expected. We knew there were legal challenges. They were ongoing in the courts. Unfortunately, the courts are very slow. So it just leads to this craziness where, we have this, it creates all this crazy turmoil. And then, later on in time, they're like, oh, actually, you couldn't do that, right? And that's how our legal system works. And it's slow and it's frustrating. And it's kind of like, well, couldn't we have, I don't know, dealt with this ahead of time before we created the crazy? But I think that was part of the point. Like, to be honest, I think the crazy was a little bit of the point. I think it was, they knew there was a good chance they were not going to win this. Essentially, Trump was using powers that under a particular code section that he believed gave him the right to kind of, unilaterally do what he wanted with tariffs on any countries as he felt like doing. And the courts came back and said, no, this code section you're trying to use is not meant that way. That's not what it's for, right? and therefore you're going to need to go through Congress. Now, some people are confused because they're like, wait a second, you said I got to go through Congress, but then I heard that Trump put, after this ruling, he put 10% tariffs on all the countries, a blanket 10% tariff. And then the next day he increased it to 15%. And you might be saying, well, how did he do that without Congress? And so now he's trying to use a different code section, which again, could be challenged. But this code section isn't quite as flexible as what he went with before. So the reason he chose the other one was because it kind of let him do whatever he wanted for any amount of time. This one has, I believe it's a 5-month limit, so he can't put them into perpetuity. But a lot of what Trump uses tariffs for is for making deals, right? Like that is what, good or bad, however you feel about it, that is his leverage. And so I think there's a lot of frustration that his leverage is gone. And now a lot of countries are thinking, well, wait a second, we made these trade deals thinking these tariffs were coming in. And now he doesn't even have the right to do those tariffs. So did we give away too much in these trade deals? And, are they going to try to renegotiate trade deals? And how's that all going to go down? We don't know. We're going to have to wait and see. The messiness is not over just because the Supreme Court came down with this decision. In fact, I would argue that the messiness is just beginning. So on here, you can find a little bit more about, what happened. But essentially, the Supreme Court said, nope, you can't do this he was using the IEPA, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, as his essentially justification for him as the president to be able to do this. Now, again, like I said, he went ahead and levied 15% on all kinds of trading partners. The European Union is especially upset because they're saying, wait a second, we made these trade deals and, now we're getting the same, and like China and them didn't, and now we're getting the same tariffs that they are. How is this fair? So there's a lot of, this is gonna throw things into just a little bit of a tizzy, a little bit more of a tizzy. We didn't have a tizzy before. We have a tizzy today. So this is kind of a useful situation. So now he's looking at using sections under the Tariff Act of 1974. Again, though, without Congress, after about 5 months, I think it is, Congress does have to step in and pass these to allow him to do it. So this is kind of one of those, I'd say, first, really major checks on Trump's executive power, both by the courts and then depending on what Congress does, right? I don't see an appetite for Congress to pass anything that gives him the tariff authority that he really wants, especially with the midterm elections coming up this year. I just don't see it happening. You never know. I might come back and say I was wrong. But ultimately, I don't really see that being something he's going to get. And definitely after the midterms, it's going to be a lot harder. That's almost definitely the case, that he won't have quite the majority that he does now. So we'll see what happens with tariffs. Now you might be wondering, okay, wait, a lot of people were celebrating. They were like, okay, well, then does this mean the tariffs that I paid, I get back, right? Am I going to get a big tariff refund? Unfortunately, probably not. And so let's talk about how that's going to work. So first and foremost, the way tariffs here, I'm going to share the tariff protest because there is a way to protest tariffs that you paid. Now you only have 180 days really from essentially it's when you paid the tariff roughly to contest it. So unfortunately, there's not much, even in the case, and my understanding is that even in the case that this a new ruling comes out, right? If you paid it more than 180 days ago, if that time period has passed, you don't have standing anymore to challenge it. So some especially big companies, were preemptively protesting this stuff so that they would reserve the right to get potentially a refund if something like just happened with the Supreme Court ended up happening. So, the question is, are damages going to be limited to potentially just the people who brought the suit, right? Like if they were named in the suit and they were the ones who were actually part of that, they will most likely get some damages awarded on these. But the average person, I don't know. We're going to have to see. So the way it would work, it's not automatic, that's for sure. If you want a chance to be able to get back tariffs that you paid. Now, this is only if you are the direct importer. You are the importer of record. You directly paid the tariffs. If somebody else imported and paid the tariffs and passed the tariff on to you in the form of a price increase or whatever, right? Added fee, you don't have that standing to do a protest. And this is where it gets messy, right? Because tariffs aren't just paid by one entity. They are actually, regardless of who actually pays it, they're paid by people. And so it is almost certain that most people are not going to see a penny from this ruling. Okay. But if you are an importer of record, here's what I want you to do literally today. If you paid a bunch of tariffs, you need to go in and reserve the right to be able to challenge those and potentially get a refund. What you can do is file a protest. So this is where you can, here is how you do it. Where I am right now, I have linked, okay? But you're gonna want to file a protest, and ultimately that's this CBP Form 19, okay? And that's U.S. Customs and Border Protection. That's what CBP is. That's the division that is in charge of these tariffs and collecting on them. But like I said, let me show you where it kind of tells you what you can do. There is some FAQs, but if we come over here, you can find the actual form right here. And so it's going to be maybe a little hard to see. Let me blow it up a little bit. But this is what the form looks like, where you can essentially say, okay, here's what I paid, the information about it, and kind of claim that a refund for it. Because you're essentially protesting that you shouldn't have had to pay this to begin with. And in your protest explanation, you could reference the Supreme Court ruling and say that it was unconstitutional, et cetera, and then potentially get it. So this is where the 180 days comes in. If your protest is denied, et cetera, you may do so by bringing a civil action within 180 days. There's another 180 days. If it's denied, then you have another 180 days. But the first 180 days essentially starts roundabout when you officially paid the tariff. So if you paid it, more than 6 months ago, it might be harder. This is why I'm telling people, if you are an importer and you did pay tariffs directly, go ahead and file this for like everything that you paid under, under these new tariffs, right? Because you're kind of reserving, you get to stop the clock at that point and say like, hey, I'm contesting this. And so that stops the clock and allows you to claw back that 180 days. Now, again, will we see people actually getting refunds over this? I was listening to a legal opinion this morning that said what the Trump admin might argue to not have to pay these back out, right? Because they collected, I think he said roughly 200 billion. I have not fact checked that, but roughly 200 billion in these tariffs. And so one argument they could make potentially to try to not pay these out is to say that the people who paid these, because most of them did pass it on, right? Tariffs are often, almost always actually passed on in the form of higher prices or the form of fees or whatever to, the person purchasing from the importer. And so the argument could be that, do these importers actually have standing if they weren't the ultimate ones that paid the tariff at the end of the day? I would argue that that's kind of a bad, a bad argument, because that implies that they weren't damaged by these tariffs. But we all know that when you raise prices, right, demand goes down. So they were. And so I'm curious to see how this plays out, but they're going to now try probably not to pay out these. And again, if you weren't the direct importer anyway, right, you could try, like if let's say the importer did get a refund for this, you could try to then say, hey, you owe me money back. But it's I would say very unlikely as a consumer or a small business owner, if you're not the importer of record, that you're going to see a penny for this. Yes, let me see this. Lee says, do you think that this will be the same outcome for consumers as the COVID price increases, in which prices were raised on products and services but were never lowered? I would say, and this is not my opinion, this is based on literal historical information. Deflation, even when it comes, like even after, let's say, significant inflation, deflation pretty much never happens. We might stagnate and see a slowing of inflation, but deflation, meaning our prices go backwards, unlikely. Certain categories, maybe, right? Like if there were certain categories that were heavily affected by this, cars, for instance, right? We may see a pullback in that because they were heavily impacted by these tariffs. And so we may see a pullback in certain industries that were heavily impacted. But I'll tell you, if corporations feel like they can get away with those price increases, right? It's going to be hard, especially as a public. I've worked for public companies. I worked for a Fortune 500 company for 10 years. And let me tell you how often we actually like fully decreased prices. Pretty much never, right? On the whole, we would run specials, sure. But did we decrease what the regular price point of our product was? Pretty much never, right? And so, once consumers have kind of adjusted to the new price, it's very unlikely we're going to see a pullback. So I think you're dead on, Lee, in saying, as these prices increased, unless the only unless is that they saw such a decrease in demand, right? That's what's going to necessitate it. But if their demand didn't significantly decrease with these price increases, they're probably going to keep the price increase, and then now they get to pocket the rest, right? They don't have to pay the tariffs; they can pocket the rest. Now their profit margins just got higher, and that's more than likely what's going to happen. Small businesses that don't have the same sometimes demand kind of elasticity, they're more likely probably to reduce prices because they need to out of necessity. So this is part of the problem. This goes into why monopolies are an issue too, because when there's not good price competition out there, these big companies can kind of do whatever they want. And that is a problem for the rest of us. So we kind of have to demand it, I think. Like, I think it's going to have to be from the people to demand, with our pocketbooks, meaning like we don't buy the things anymore if they are too expensive. That's how you get prices down. They're not going to do it they're not going to say, oh, tariffs are gone, now let's reduce that increase in price that we put through in most cases, right? That's how it goes. But that's a really good question, Lee. Okay. So anyway, go fill out your protest forms. If you are an importer of record, if you were directly paying those tariff fees, that will give you an option if and when, there is a way to get paid out for this. It could take years. I just want to also level set that. This will not be fast. This will not be fast. They will not be incentivized to do this quickly. It will not be fast. And so if you are doing this, just know, go ahead and do it, but don't count on this money coming back to you. Just don't count on it. Make it like an extra, like, oh, if it comes back, awesome, but don't be relying on this money because it may not come. And if it does, it may be literal years before it does. Now, that leads me to another conversation that I think is important to be had about this, in part because I see the writing on the wall for this, and I want to warn people. I want to warn you, my small business owners. Okay. I want to warn you. Here's what's already in the works. Okay. I'm going to show you something on, here we go. All right. So this is an article from Business Insider. This is from a little bit ago, but it is talking about how scary is the scariest chart. Oh no, this is the wrong. Sorry. We can't get to that. Sorry. That was a teaser for the next one. Ignore you saw that, but stick around because we've got the scariest chart coming up next. So, but for this, when we're talking about tariffs still, let's talk about this article. And this is again from a little while ago, but essentially, and we're not going to get into the politics of all of this, but there was a company called Cantor Fitzgerald. They've since denied some of this, but there was a company called Cantor Fitzgerald that our old or our current Commerce Secretary actually used to work for. And oh shoot, I can't read it now because I already read it. But you guys can. If you haven't seen this article yet, you'll be able to read it. But ultimately, what this article is saying is it's talking about essentially getting rebates for tariffs. And other companies, like big companies, right, like Cantor Fitzgerald, going in and essentially purchasing the rights for pennies on the dollar to get these tariff refunds. So what does that mean exactly? Let me pull... I don't think I have it to pull up, but essentially like what tariff refund rights are. So let's say you're an importer and you paid $100,000 in tariffs over the last year, and I don't know if you're going to get that back. You're not sure what's going to happen, right? Then a company that buys these tariff refund rights could come in and say, hey, we'll give you $20,000 or $30,000, 20% or 30%. Just give us your tariff refund rights. And then you lose the risk, and we'll take on the risk that we won't get it back. This has been something that's been in the works and happening. And the thing that gets me on this is it's another instance where it's like big business coming in to profit off of small business. So small business just keeps losing and losing and losing again in this, right? Because small business, they're counting on the fact that like, hey, would you take $20,000 today versus like a bird in the hand, right? Kind of situation. You probably need this small company that doesn't have all the cash flow in the world. So we're going to offer you a small percentage so that you don't have to wait a couple of years to maybe get the full amount back. I feel like this is the next ERC scam central that's going to pop up, is going to be these tariff refund claims. And they're going to be telling people that, they qualify when maybe they don't, or, we're going to see robocalls. Like I know there's blood in the water, and this is where they come out, right? And they use their big budgets. They have tons of disposable cash to be able to essentially buy these back. And to me, like there's a lot of there's questionable things like insider trading types things, because people have, from what I have seen and heard, this already exists. So, again, it's kind of one of those situations where, we're creating a problem, and then they're also being able to profit off of that problem they created, which I think, I have a lot of ethical questions about. Right? Yes, I'm glad. It doesn't make me feel good. This whole thing doesn't make me feel good. And I feel like the small business is gonna get the short end of the stick again in all of this. And it's really unfortunate. So I just want to tell you guys, be on the lookout. Go file your own forms. Go file your own protest forms if you paid tariffs directly. You might as well just file them all. And if something happens with it, great, right? And do it as soon as possible, because again, there is a time clock on it, and you don't want tariffs you paid to be falling off and you can no longer get that money for it. So this is me telling you, go do this. And then I will keep you updated as there are things that roll out, because we're going to see those challenges of what happens with these companies. If, is there a legal claim that could be made, by consumers that paid higher prices, or by small businesses that paid higher prices, even though they weren't the importer, on record? If that importer is getting a refund, do we potentially have a right to it? I think it's going to get messy. I think the average person is not going to see a dime of this, which is unfortunate. And it's going to continue to be messy. So that is unfortunately not the best update. Probably not what you want to hear, but on the plus side, I do think that it is good. Hopefully we will have more line of sight on what tariffs are going to be. Maybe not in the next 6 months, but I think eventually this is going to work its way out. I've just always said uncertainty is the enemy of business. And so this up and down and tariffs one day and not the next, I understand the desire to use this as a negotiating tool, but I think it can sometimes be at the not behest, whatever the word, at the expense, that's the word I'm looking for, at the expense of, the rest of us, which is not Ideal. Okay, so let's talk about the scariest chart in the world that you guys are sticking around because you're curious now what this is. All right, let's bring that article back up. This is unrelated to tariffs. This is the third thing that I wanted to talk about. And this kind of shows the disconnect of where we are right now versus how we're feeling, right? Like what the market is doing. There's a lot. I mean, there's all the memes about like the Dow is 50,000, all of that, right? And it's funny because it's like, we're supposed to think like, regardless of how we're feeling economically, the Dow is at 50,000. So it can't be that bad. Things are great economically. And oftentimes in the past, that actually was not untrue, not like completely untrue. We did have a tracking where how the market was doing really did track at least with jobs, right? At least with jobs and job growth. As the market grew, so did jobs, right? As companies were making more money, they were hiring more people. We saw kind of, those things move in tandem. So when we talk about this scariest chart in the world, what is it? Well, it's this one. And let me blow this up a little bit so that you can see it as much as possible. Okay. So what this is showing you, all right, is you've got S&P 500 on the top here. That's the blue line. And the green kind of dotted is the job openings for non-farm payroll. Okay. So you can see that usually these things move pretty much in tandem. There's a little bit of weirdness here during COVID, which makes sense, right? Because the market was still going up, but we had a lot of job losses. But that was kind of one of those weird time periods. And then it kind of aligns again. But what the heck happened at the end of like 2022, beginning of 2023? All of a sudden, the market is climbing and climbing and climbing. And this has even gone up from here, right? And jobs are declining. Job openings are declining. What is going on? And I think the reason that this is scary is because we've almost like pulled apart things that we thought were true, right? Things that we thought like, okay, the market is an indicator of the overall economy. And the economy is an indicator of how many people are employed. And it moves in tandem, right? It's not anymore. Why? If anybody wants to guess, I'll give you a second to guess. I'm not saying there is one thing I'm going to tell you about that I think is at least part of this. And I think it's something to watch out for because it may be a bubble. And I think that we as normal people, if you're invested in the market, just be aware of this. I am not, there's no financial advice coming in here. I am invested in the market. Okay. But I think that there's at least a partial reason here that we can point to as to what's going on with this divergence. Here's where you can find this article if you want to go check it out yourself. And I want to be careful. I don't want to, correlation and causation. Correlation does not imply causation. We all learned that in our statistics class. That was drilled into our heads. But right around, I believe it was November of 2022. Do you know what came out? What was released to the masses? ChatGPT and OpenAI in general. And that's right around the time, again, maybe a coincidence, but I think it stands to reason to say that the rise in AI, number one, largely the companies that are part of this, right? That are part of this growth in the S&P 500 and the Dow, it's a handful of companies that are crushing it. And those are largely the AI companies or the ones that are leveraging AI the most. And so part of that is these AI companies doing better and better and better. And so it's not necessarily that all big corporations are doing well. It's that these specific ones are doing quite well. So that's one of the reasons. But then you look at, why is it converging with the jobs data or diverging with the jobs data? What would be the reason of that? Well, similarly, as AI grows, in theory, it gives more ability to streamline operations, become more efficient, which we knew, and they told us would lead to less jobs. So jobs are being eliminated. They're being backfilled when people leave, by, others with and utilizing AI capabilities in order to get more done. It's definitely happening. And so I think that's not all this is. That's not all that this is, but that is at least a good part of this chart and what's happening. And to me, my concern is, are we in a bubble? Now that bubble, we may be, but it still may be a while before that bubble bursts. But anytime I see kind of charts that make me go, what's really happening here? I watch it. I just want to watch it. I want to keep an eye on it. So I encourage you to do the same thing. Don't go panic selling everything. Like, that's not what I'm telling you to do. I'm just saying this is interesting. This is a little worrisome. And yeah, let me pull up your comment, Lee. Here's the growth of AI and IT outsourcing outside of the US. Yeah. Also, with the rise of AI and robotics, it looks like a lot of manufacturing jobs will be disappearing. Yeah. And so that's the other thing. That's the other thing here is it kind of ties into tariffs. Let me take this down for a second. But I feel like this whole conversation ties into tariffs too, because the whole point, like what they've been told us the point of tariffs is to bring jobs back to America. We want to bring these jobs back to America. Well, a lot of these jobs are going away anyway because of AI. So, is it even going to work? Even if we bring more plants over here, right? Is it going to have the impact on jobs in the way that, we want it to? I feel like manufacturing is one of the, it feels really nostalgic to throw back to the good old days of manufacturing, right? When we manufactured everything here and in the US. We don't live in 1950 anymore. If we brought manufacturing back here, it would look completely different. And AI and robotics would be a big part of that. So I think my personal thing is we need to stop looking back and saying, man, that was that great nostalgic, rosy retrospection, right? Like great, we had manufacturing jobs. Guess what? I wouldn't have been able to get a credit card without my husband co-signing. So I have no interest in going back to 1950 personally, right? And we need to look at what works today. What do we need to do today in the society, in the job marketplace that we have today with the tools that we have like AI? What do we do to keep our economy strong and to also keep the people and community strong as well? And I don't know the answer to that. That's what our politicians are for, and they need to solve for that. I worry that that's not the things they're really focused on, unfortunately, on either side of the aisle, but that's, my 2 cents on all of that. Okay. All right. Y'all got to get on my soapbox for a hot second. Okay, I'm going long today, so we're going to quickly switch into to-dos and cues. I'll cut down those sections a little bit and go through them kind of fast, but they are important. Okay, couple of things, to-dos. We're in February. It's the end of February. Y'all, if you don't have a plan for your taxes, please do it now. As soon as we're done here, go make a plan for your taxes. If you don't know who's going to be doing your taxes, you need to go find that person. I also want to say, like, you can go in and file your extensions and things like that. It's always a good thing. Even if you're still going to try to get it in by the deadline, filing an extension will help you not end up accidentally having, fines and penalties for not filing. So just make your plan, get your books together if they're not already. A lot of the best bookkeepers and best accountants are already booked up at this point. Doesn't mean they don't exist and there aren't people there that can help you. Get some help if you need it. But just make that plan. We are closing in on it. For S Corps, your return date, this is me, I have an 1120S. I've been working on it. I got to file it by March 15th or file an extension. So I'm trying to get it in by March 15th, but I still file my extension just in case. And if you're a partnership and you have to file a 1065, March 15th, okay? So that's an adjustment sometimes for business owners. We tend to think April when we think about taxes, but for business owners, you got some things that are due before that, okay? So just be on the lookout for all the things, taxes. talking about S Corp, the other deadline, if you are not an S Corporation and you want to be one for this year and going forward, March 15th is also your deadline to elect S Corp tax treatment. This can allow you to save a lot of money on taxes. In my opinion, this works best for business owners that have 6 figures in profit. The calculation differs though, okay? And so if you're not sure, I do have a masterclass that goes into this. You still have time to file this S Corp election. So definitely go check out my masterclass. If you have not seen it, this is my S Corp Switch masterclass. It gives you all the details on what an S Corp is, how it differs, how your LLC or your sole prop can elect to be taxed as an S Corp and what that means, and how to calculate whether it's worth it for you. Okay. So go see that masterclass if you haven't yet. This is the time. We don't want to go past that March 15th deadline because it is harder to elect after that point. And because I mentioned it, crew, like I said, high interest, high yield, okay, checking account, personal checking account with crew. Go check it out until February 28th. You have a special deal that you're going to be able to get. And that is an APY boost for 3 months, a 1% APY boost. And so that's going to come out to 3.95% APY for the first 3 months. That's almost 4% interest. That is fabulous on a checking account, And you can have all your different pockets and goals and envelopes and things like that. Your kids can have accounts. It's the best. I have been obsessed with it since last year, which is why I'm advocating for a personal checking account. Okay. And now that's all my to-dos. So we'll get into a couple of cues. We're running a little long, so I'll keep it short. But there are a few things that I thought were worth talking about. Okay, so going along with tax season, I got a question from Terry that I've summarized, which she said a couple questions. Should my bookkeeper and tax person be the same person? And how do I know if I need a CPA or if I need an EA or a tax preparer for my business? Okay, so first and foremost, your bookkeeper and your tax person can be the same person. I do not recommend it, and I'll tell you why. A couple of reasons. Number one, someone who's a good bookkeeper may not be a good tax preparer, and someone who's a good tax preparer may be an awful bookkeeper. Okay. They are not the same skill set. They're interrelated, but they're not the same skill set. So if you are using the same, person, hopefully it's the same company, but different people who have those skill sets. Because also, reason number two, a CPA, if you're using a CPA to file your taxes and you ask them to do your bookkeeping, it's going to be expensive. It ain't going to be cheap. They're going to charge you more, not because they're better bookkeepers, but just because CPAs charge more per hour, right? So that'd be the other thing. And the third reason, and I think the most important reason to keep them separate, is because it's an automatic check and balance, right? So you're more likely to find issues or problems in your bookkeeping or with your taxes if you have two different people from two different companies looking at this. I think that is a plus, right? I think that helps give us more kind of assurances that our information is correct. So multiple sets of eyes is a good thing. So that's what I would say about that. And do you need a CPA or an EA? Honestly, so I'm a CPA. You don't want me doing your taxes. You really don't. That ain't my thing. I'm a financial educator. I am not a tax preparer. So I'd say it depends, but EAs, I love EAs because that is what they're trained to do. An EA is an enrolled agent. Sometimes they get a bad rap versus a CPA, but a CPA, CPAs can specialize in any number of things. An EA is specific to taxes and tax preparation. So I actually think sometimes that may be a better way to go. And they might be a little bit cheaper, but CPAs are amazing too. No shade to CPAs. Just make sure they're a specialist in, especially if you have like a different kind of industry and you want to make sure that they understand your industry. Just that's the most important thing with any person that you are vetting to do your tax work for you. I'd also say check and see if they just do tax preparation or if they also do some kind of tax advisement. Sometimes it comes in one package. Sometimes you have to add on the advisement package. above and beyond your tax preparation. Don't assume that because someone's preparing your taxes, they're also looking for opportunities for you to save on taxes. Those are kind of two different skill sets and two different things that you pay for. So just something to be aware of. And then the next question I had is from John. And he said, I elected S Corp. I get this question so often. I elected S Corp for my business, but didn't make as much money last year as I thought. And I'm assuming he's meaning he didn't make his entire reasonable salary. Can I cancel the S election? So yes, you can. You can cancel an S Corp election, but you can only revoke it. It's essentially not canceling it. It's revoking your S Corp election. That's what it's technically called. And you can do it, but you can't then elect to be taxed as an S Corp again for 5 years. So that's really them trying to prevent you from being an S Corp 1 year, then going back to like a LLC, then being an S Corp, then being, that's going to get things all messy. So I would say if it's just like 1 year that you had a down year, it's fine. And it's okay if in a down year, you don't pay yourself your reasonable salary. It's not a huge deal as long as you don't take a draws and things like that in addition. But I would say if it's one down year, just stick with it. Even if it didn't really save you a lot, it's fine to stick with. If you're like, you know what, no, I actually don't foresee this being worth it for me in the near term, then it may be time to do a revocation and revoke your S Corp election. So it really does depend. And there's a form you would file to essentially revoke your election. And so that would be my advice. I'm looking back down through. Here's again, I'll give a quick plug for our S Corp switch. If you're like, what is all this S Corp madness? I don't know anything about this. Definitely check out this masterclass because I go into a lot of detail that's easy to understand on what exactly it is and what it means for you and if it could be helpful. All right. That's it for today's live. Thank you for being here. Again, if you're watching on replay, make sure to comment and say hello. And we've got some exciting stuff coming up soon. So make sure that you stay tuned in. I love doing these to just be able to stay kind of on the pulse of what's going on in real time. And I just appreciate y'all. So thanks for being here and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.